meron po tayong 61 participants at dumadami pa po. So, ngayon po, sisimulan ko na po ang aking pagtatalakay. Just a disclaimer, if you notice po, ang haba po na presentation, ang haba po ng nilagay nila na title dun sa aking talk. It's Considerations in Designing Facilities for Active Transport and Using Technology to Enhance Transport Operations. So minarapat ko po na ipagsabay na lang po yung dalawang yun. Kaya po, ang akin pong, sorry, I need to share my screen. Okay, thank you. So minarapat ko po na ang akin pong topic for today will become, all right, let me just check can you see my screen? Sorry,
yes,
Arlan. All right, thank you. All right. So my topic for today will really just be transport operations in the new normal. I will touch on the two aspects that were actually included in the title of my lecture for this afternoon. Allow me also to disable my videos to ensure that I have a more smooth transmission of data. All right, so una po. So, katulad po na nasabi kanina, ako po ay nag-aral sa Japan. Ang naturo po sa amin, ang unang-una po dapat ay kung ano ang flow ng ating presentation. So I will talk about snapshots of the old normal, just so we would be on the same page as we move towards the new normal, transition from old to new normal, and transport operations under the new normal, and moving towards a better future. So let's start. To manage expectations, I would like to state at the start of this presentation that the focus will largely be urban transport, so therefore we'll cover road and rail transport. The presentation is structured such that we will see how it was during the old normal and also how it is in the post-ECQ or the new normal. It will likewise highlight the initiatives of the department moving forward. Moreover, the focus of the presentation is urban transport. I've discussed that already. So this is a scene, okay? Hindi po ito na nakita lang natin sa pandemic, di ba po? Kahit dati pa po, meron na tayong ganitong nakikita, kakulangan ng ating public transportation at ang ating mga tao, ating mananakay, ay nandoon sa kalsada dahil wala po tayong tamang boarding and alighting stations. So hindi po yan bago sa atin. Dati pa po, the load factor of MRT3, for instance, pre-pandemic was on an average of 94.66, meaning it's almost full, so you have people who are standing. Also, another snapshot before the pandemic, you would see that we still had long travel times. No? Ito po, nakikita natin, this is for the period of August 5 to 23, with 327 respondents. They were actually asked, how long did you have to wait for transport? So for UV Express, it was 34 minutes. For MRT, LRT, PNR, it's 28 minutes. And for jeepneys, that's 24 minutes, and the rest you would see, no? But you know, this is actually a better picture because there was a study that was done in 2015, and the waiting time was actually between 1 minute to 2 hours. So kung sobra ka pong swerte na tao, dun ka po sa 1 minute, pero pag sobra kang malas na tao, dun ka po sa 2 hours. Another characteristic of pre-pandemic public transportation is really the long travel time, no? As you can see, and when people were able to get on the right, no? Tapos na silang naghintay, they would have to endure long travel times that are basically a waste of time. There are lost times here that could have been translated to more productive use if we had arrived earlier at workplaces, schools, and even at our homes. Let's take, for instance, I am from QC, so let's take, for instance, how long it takes you to travel from QC to, because the destination here is Makati BGC. So if you travel from Quezon City to BGC, that's about 2 hours and 21 minutes. Isipin nyo na lang po, because that's actually siguro triple or even quadruple the travel time under conditions where you can travel at even 40 kilometers per hour. Why? The distance po between QC and BGC is only about 20.8 kilometers if you use C5 or 18.9 kilometers if you use EDSA. So even then, mataas na po yung travel time natin. Ano pa po ang meron sa old normal? Dati sa old normal, ang public transport natin, lalong-lalo na po yung ating traditional jeepney drivers, earned on the basis of the number of passengers carried. So that's why, if you remember, one of the biggest problem in the public transport sector is the unsafe maneuvers of drivers, because you would swerve from an inner lane to the outer lane just so that they could get more passengers. So thus, there was a competition for passengers. Also, under the new normal, the drivers had to work for 13 to 15 hours per day. Apart from that, even the operations under the new normal, under the old normal, is really fragmented. What you see there is really that yung mga jeepney operators po natin, ang pinakamarami po sa kanila ay isa lang ang kanilang jeepney. So kaya po naging problema po ito dahil ito na po ang sole source of their salary, no po. And then followed by, if you look at this, 2 vehicles so that they can outsource it. So more than 90% of operators own 1 or 2 units, which make public transportation. Ano po bang problema nito? It becomes more unwieldy because ang dami nyo pong kailangan kausapin na operator to manage. So that was the old normal. And I hope we all remember that was how it was in the old normal. And then, while we were sleeping, favorite ko po yan na K-drama, COVID-19 pandemic happened. If you remember, on March 11, the World Health Organization declared the corona disease as a global pandemic. And then, consequently, on March 16, 2020, the President of the Philippines imposed enhanced community quarantine and stringent social distancing measures in Luzon. The first one to be suspended during this time was really the suspension, the public transport with all modes, land, air, water. Now, of course, because public transportation was suspended, you can see that there's now a drop in the drop of change in transit mobility. So as we move, we can expect shifts in mobility patterns due to the imposition of quarantine. So for instance, in this particular slide, you would see that there's a drop of movement in transit stations due to the halting of public transport services. If you can also see, Metro Manila had it worse than the national average. There was also a change in even the origin destination, as you can see. For instance, there's a drop in movement in retail and recreation, grocery and pharmacy, even in parks, in transit stations and workplaces, because everybody, it was a quarantine, so may lockdown po tayo. The only increase was around residential areas. I think that's very important, because when you plan transport, those are things you need to look at. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the first service that was suspended during ECQ was public transportation. And I'd like to just show you the transition from old normal and to the new normal. So ng ECQ, wala pong tumatakbo. As if you remember, only those public shuttle for frontliners, company shuttle, and personal vehicles actually there should be for persons or workers in permitted sectors and activities. Now, under GCQ, everything's allowed, except that we are limited by load factor. Then that becomes our new challenge. Under the new normal, transport operations has a two-pronged objective. One, efficiency, so that we'll be able to meet the requirements of the commuting public and ensure unhampered movement of goods to support economic activity. The other one, of course, is safety and health. Important in transport operations is to ensure that the spread of the virus is controlled through the reduction of transmission by the implementation of stringent health and sanitary protocols, as well as reduction of contact. Now, I would like to discuss transport operations based on lessons from neighboring countries on how it is done. So it's actually divided into these major categories. The first category of measure that's done even in neighboring countries under the pandemic is demand control. So if you remember po, during even now, we now have work from home schemes. So these are actually, these are scenes that are now familiar to us under the new normal. Okay, so Asia Today estimated that the shift to learning, the distance learning, has been a logistical nightmare for the poverty-stricken Southeast Asian country that has long lacked enough classrooms, teachers, and educational equipment. Nearly 25 million students enrolled this year, mostly in 47,000 public schools nationwide, that would have to be replicated in homes and enlist the help of parents and guardians as co-teachers. What you have on your lower right-hand corner picture are teachers who are actually searching for internet connection. This is in Davao. This is in the province of Davao. So as you can see, the pandemic has not only brought challenges to transport, but even in other fronts. Earlier, as I was introduced, if you remember, I'm part of a network which looks at women in transport. So this particular situation has actually heightened gender issues in transport. But then again, that's another lecture. So moving forward, po. Now, if ways started because it should have been reduced demand, right? So dapat walang nagbabiyahe po, demand control. Ngunit diningnan po namin yung data na binigay ng Waze. There was still a lot of areas that experienced low speed, right? Particularly northbound from 9 to 10 a.m., 4 to 6 p.m., and even southbound. And we found out, based on the data that we got, that the Saturday speeds are the worst in the afternoon. So ito lang po was actually taken from that. So the top 3 routes with lowest speed would be Calentong Pasig, Cubao, Doroteo Jose, and Cubao, Montalban. Now, earlier mentioned, as I've said, that even with demand control, okay, we still have problems of congestion. The second category is to reduce density. Earlier on, I said that public transport operations will now have to look into issues about reduction of load factor. So what we have here is that we reduce passenger density by 50%, and now we also reinforce the temperature monitoring and disinfection measures on subways, buses, and hopefully traditional jeepneys. So ano po bang ibig sabihin nito? Number 1, ang ibig pong sabihin nito, dahil may social distancing, sa mga pictures na nakikita po natin, mas lalo pong kumonte ang load capacity, no? So mas kumonte yung pwedeng masakyan, magamit ng mga manlalakbay, sa mga commuters. Second, okay, so these are just the passenger load limits for the road sector. It's all 50%. UV Express is 2 passengers per row, taxis and CNVF, 2 passengers per row, and shuttle service also for per row. Now, ano pa po? Again, sorry, this is just a visual representation because one of the things I'd like to highlight is the importance of communication. When you are under a pandemic situation, what's really important is that people understand what you want to happen. So there are visual guides for some of our, for the commuters, how they, saan po sila dapat nakaupo. So this is an example of a visual guide that the department has actually developed. Now, during the opening, like GCQ, nagsimula po ang rail sector at 12% for the LRT Line 1, LRT Line 2, 10%, MRT Line 3, 13%, and PNR, 20%. This has since, like for MRT 3, this has since been increased to 40%. But as you can see, still not the same load factor as it was before. Again, also under the new normal, we now have to wear face masks and face shields all the time. We have to use cashless payments. I'll talk about this a little bit later. I'll talk about this more a little bit later. Use of thermal scanners, alcohols and sanitizers in PUVs, disinfection of often touched surfaces, disinfecting facilities, and contact tracing. This have become additional obligations for public transport operations. And because of this, kanina po, I also showed you that pre-pandemic, we had longer waiting time. It has also, with reduced load factor and safety protocols, boarding is also delayed. So as you can see, kasi kailangan po ng thermal scanners and so these are just examples, or these are just pictures of disinfecting facilities under the new normal. Naalala ko lang po, may joke nga dati dahil daw sa kahuhugas natin ng kamay, nakikita niya na po ang kodigo niya na ginamit na nung high school pa. Sana may nakalirelate pa sa inyo. Okay. Now, these are safety protocols. And I've mentioned earlier, one of the things that has happened under the pandemic situation is the reduced load factor. Hence, hindi lang po sa transport yun, public transport ang effect nito. Meron din po itong tinatawag na social impact of on the transport sector. Hindi po lingid sa inyo yung visual na ito, no? Kahit wala yan sa picture na yan, I'm sure you passed some of the jeepney drivers who beg for money on the street. Gusto ko lang po ipakita, katulad po nitong isang, sorry, I just want to highlight that the one on the upper right side, if you would see that the jeepney has now also become a home for some drivers who could not probably afford the rent in their homes. You know, everything I've talked about shows how dismal the situation is under the pandemic. But it has been said that the character for crisis in Chinese can also be interpreted as opportunity, or more accurately, change point. So I'd also like to highlight that despite the many tragedies and travails that the virus has brought, it has also provided a change point. What are those? I'm not sure if many of you are aware of the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program of the government. Or if you are aware, it's possible that you see this as a jeepney modernization program, which is really not. And I think that's a tragedy because the objectives of the program has now been reduced to just the jeepney modernization program, but it's more than that. The PUV modernization program has the primary objective of making our public transportation more efficient, and safe for the commuters. So we would get what they call, and I would quote my friend here, Dr. Montalvo, dignity of travel. So therefore, under the pandemic situation, you would see that you were able to use this bad situation to materialize or to operationalize two important objectives of the modernization program. One is the reform and the consolidation of the industry. I've shown you in an earlier slide that right now, more than 90% of our jeepney operators have one or two vehicles. So it's really difficult to manage them. The intent is to consolidate them and to put them as one cooperative or one company. All right. So let's see what has happened under the pandemic. Okay. The Department of Transportation in cooperation with LTFRB has managed to reduce 96 bus routes to 31 rationalized routes with 4,600 authorized units. The best part is that there are only two consortia that manage this. So it's actually easier for the government to monitor and evaluate. One of the benefits, of course, is that it has faster travel time. As you can see, from PRTX to Trinoma, it has 38, it's now reduced to 38 minutes, and Trinoma to Monumento is 55 minutes. This is part of the route rationalization of the department, which now consists of 26 stations, boarding and alighting only at specified areas. I know I'll get questions later on about this, na hindi naman daw nasusunod, but that's the intent. And if you also remember the last portion of the PUVMP slide I showed earlier, which one of the objectives is to improve the working conditions of drivers. Under the consolidated operations, drivers are paid on paid salaries based on the 2012 and 2019 DOLE issuances. Also, to help the leaguered public transport drivers and operators, the department has a fuel subsidy program. Coverage is about 30% of the daily fuel consumption. Another program, but this was pre-pandemic, but still I'd like to flash this, is the Super Scholar program. Because, there may be some who opt to look at other skills, no longer just driving. So I'd like to just say that we have the Super Scholar program, which has a training and a training component in the skill that you wish to be you wish to be trained in. Recently, kasama po, if you have read the news, recently under the Bayanihan 2 Act, one of the provisions in the Bayanihan 2 Act is that the DOTR will undertake a service contracting program, which will provide guaranteed revenues to our transport industry, regardless of passenger demand, which is the intention of the law. Let me just, before I actually discuss with you the elements of service contracting, let me then just remind you of the previous slide I showed, where the drivers are actually paid on a passenger based on the number of passengers they carry. So therefore, they were competing for passengers. All right. Under the service contracting, the government will contract operators and drivers to render public transportation services based on vehicle kilometers, as compared to the status quo of earning based on passenger kilometers. We have what we call performance-based contract. So ito po ay subsidy, pero ang tawag po dito ay performance-based subsidy. The drivers will be paid on a vehicle kilometer, based on the vehicle kilometer operated. Also, they would have to be asked to render reliable service. based on headway. Drivers and vehicles will be subjected to monitoring and monitoring so that they would have good quality, passenger and staff security. And one of the things that we've added under the service contracting is that the commuter has the chance to actually rate the driver. Okay? I believe this is very important because we have been silent. The commuters have been silent for the longest time. Under the service contracting, what we'd like to do is to ensure that the commuters are heard. Imperfect, but we are going to start it. All right, so that's a second category of public transport operations under the pandemic. The third category of operations under the pandemic, this is actually, I forgot this. These are just the prospective advantages of service contracting. So therefore, for the operators, it's stable income despite the reduction in load factor, as well as reasonable working hours. For commuters, it's predictable service based on headways or the time between two succeeding public transport modes, safe travel due to standards for driver behavior as a condition of the contract, and the availability of feedback mechanism for improvement of service. Now, another category of intervention during the pandemic is to make sure that logistics will not be hampered. So, towards this end, when the ECQ was implemented, the PPA suspended the requirement of cargo entry with withdrawal permits, gave discounts of 40% on cargo charges for identified agricultural and food products under the Department Order 2020-007, and there has been no increase in additional port fees, cargo handling, pilotage, terminal, and miscellaneous charges. Ang importante po nito ay may nakalabas po na circular. So wala pong pagdududa. Kung may nagtatanong, ito po yun, wala dapat dagdag na port fee. Hindi lang naman po goods ang tiningnan ng department, pati rin po ang paggalaw ng ating medical frontliners. So at the start of the pandemic, the department started with 3 routes to serve hospital workers. Now it is increased to 20 routes with 69 hospitals in its route. The fourth category for operations of transport operations under the pandemic is to use technology as a leverage, no? Ano po ba yun? Ibig sabihin, ginagamit na po natin ang technology. Now, even if you think about it, kahit hindi pa sa transport, before I move to transport, if you think about it, we do that a lot already under the work from home, no? Kaya nagiging issue na yung ating mahina na internet. So we're now leveraging technology to improve efficiency in our work life. All right? So sa transport po, okay, meron po tayong iba't iba. I'll talk about, and I'll just highlight a few, no po. Yung automatic fare collection system, but I'll talk about that a bit more later. And the mandatory use of RFID. Paalala lang po, hanggang November 30 lang po, kailangan nyo na po magpalagay ng RFID. Okay? Tapos po, sa LTO, meron po silang tinatawag na Land Transport Management System, which you do this renewal of licenses online, as well as request for the certificate of no apprehension. Isa pa pong tiningnan, if you know about sakay.ph, ginagamit po ito para doon sa ating mga healthcare workers para malaman nila kailan ang estimated arrival ng kanilang transport sa kanilang station na pwede silang sumakay. All right, let me discuss a bit about the automatic fare collection system. Okay. Okay. Now, the automatic fare collection system is really a project of the government where we have to establish standards to ensure interoperability and promote mutual trust among multiple automatic fare collection systems. So, ang sinasabi lang po natin, kasi tinatanong po ito lagi, isa lang po ba? Hindi po. Kaya nakasulat po dyan sa bottom, it's actually multiple, no? Multiple na paraan ng pagbabayad. Ito po, ay pupunta ngayon sa tinatawag nating central clearing house. So yun po yung titingnan. No? Isang proyekto po ito ng gobyerno para kahit po gumamit tayo ng smart card, kahit sa mobile, yung mga GCash, sorry, no promotion, but that's an example, not a promotion. Okay? So ito po yung image na gusto natin for AFCS. So what CTAS is a central transit acquirer system, or just the clearinghouse, central clearinghouse. I'd like to just emphasize that it's multi-issuer, hindi lang po isa, multi-operator, hindi lang po isang operator para wala pong monopoly. And then we can also have multiple fare, okay? Kasi yung iba po, ang isa nilang concern is paano kung hindi naman ako laging sumasakay dyan. So dapat po meron din tayong paraan for them to have a single fare. Okay, and then plate card, okay, ito po yung penultimate is that this will have multiple types of portable electronic device. Now, nasabi po natin, isa pa pong silver lining na sinasabi ko during this pandemic, well, during the lockdown, is that according to Clean Air Asia, air quality significantly improved during the ECQ in 3 monitoring sites in Manila, with up to 54% reduction in particulate matter in the roadside and 21 to 30% decrease in the roadside, in the non-roadside. So kayo po, pag may Facebook po kayo, nakakakita po kayo ng maraming posts na ay, ang linis ng hangin. O, nakikita po natin yan. Unfortunately, nakakalangkot lang po na nakikita na po na post-ECQ levels have started to increase again. It's similar to pre-ECQ air quality. Now, I've talked about all the 4 elements for normal operations under the pandemic. I'd also like to share na isa kasi sa ating challenges, of course, gusto natin public transport. Ngunit po, nag-run ang McKinsey & Company, gumawa po sila ng isang survey. Tinanong po nila ang mga tao, which of the following modes of transportation do you consider safe for your health, concerning a COVID-19 infection? Unfortunately po, kulelat na kulelat ang public transport. Okay po? Ang private vehicle, number 1. Kaya po, dito sa Metro Manila, kung nakikita nyo po, kaya medyo congested pa rin po. Kasi dahil sa takot ng mga tao na gumamit ng public transportation, gagamit po sila ng kanilang sariling mga sasakyan. Ngunit po, kung titingnan nyo po, pangalawa ang walking and biking. Which brings me to the next change point that this pandemic, or this opportunity that this pandemic has given us, no? Because of the pandemic, a lot of people are now moving towards what we call active transport. Ang pangalan niya po dati ay, well, ang label niya po dati sa transport planning ay non-motorized transport. Pero ngayon po, to highlight the benefits of non-motorized transport, it's now called active transport. Kasi active nga po tayo. Ang nakakatuwa lang po nito is itong pagbabalik, no? This resurgence of interest in active transport for primary recycling is actually a validation of a study that was done by the National Center for Transportation Studies for the DOTR in 2009. And one of its strategies for attaining environmentally sustainable transport is the use of active transport. right? So, parang natulungan na bumalik tayo sa nakaraan. So, ngayon po, ang department strongly encourages cycling and other modes of non-motorized transport. Now, the DOTR continues to work with the Department of Public Works, the DILG, and the DOH to develop guidelines to establish and promote active transport in national and local roads. Tanong, ano po ba ang change? Ano po ba ang opportunity na nabibigay po sa atin dahil nabigay po sa atin dahil dito? Una po, it has allowed us to look at our streets again and see that, oh, there's a way of actually framing our streets. No, it's not just because most of the time people are saying, ang roads po are just for vehicles, right? But that's the common mindset. But because of this resurgence of interest in active transport, we now think, what's a better way of looking at roads? It's really accessibility. Question, ano po ba ibig sabihin ng accessibility at mobility? Mobility is actually physical movement of people. Accessibility means I get what I need without necessarily traveling, okay? So, all right, another way that we should be changing our framing is now we think about throughput of people, okay? Rather than vehicles. Now, please remember that transportation is not the efficient movement of vehicles, but rather it's the efficient movement of people and goods. Hence, it has given us an opportunity to look at how we frame our streets. We now also look at how much it's now personal delay rather than vehicle delay. And right now we consider all trips work, not just journey to work, but journey to other purposes. It has also become an alternative to congestion. It has become an alternative to motorized vehicles, which actually cause congestion. I don't have that's another aspect that we need to look at. And now we look at levels of service from the multimodal perspective. Hindi lang po, for those of you in transport, you would know that right now what they use is a level of service based on the density of the road. But this time, because we're framing our streets, we now look at multimodal level of service. Last one, of course, well, another way of looking at changing our mindset is ang bisikleta po ay hindi lamang po it's not just for recreation, kaya po going somewhere else, but it's now become a viable alternative for places that you wish to go to. Okay, very quickly also, this is taken from the lecture of Dr. Yai for the Transportation Science Society of the Philippines, when he was discussing how what were the considerations when they made the national cycle route in Japan. I'd really like to just focus on a few things. One, if you look at it, they look at interconnectivity as an important component. So when we develop our bike routes, dapat po nakakonect sila, hindi po yung putol-putol, otherwise useless. Pangalawa po, safety. Importante din po, ang safety ng ating mga cyclists. Ito pong tatlo, gateways, rest facilities, and alternative transport services. Ibig pong sabihin, pag meron po akong bisikleta, pwede ko rin pong dapat meron ding paraan, pwede ko siyang madala at sasakay ako sa trunk line public transportation system. Importante po yun, Isa pa pong importante is the availability of information that can easily be obtained by those who would cycle. Another one is establishment of framework. Dapat po may framework tayo, hindi kanya-kanya. Kaya po, locally, the Department of Health, the Department of Transportation, and the DILG has issued a joint memorandum of agreement on this particular matter. Ang title po net, okay? promotion of active transport, guidelines on the proper use and promotion of active transport during and after COVID-19 pandemic. Gusto ko lang po i-share ano ang meron sa loob. Well, hindi lahat. Just so, you know, one of the things that's there is, ito po, ano ba dapat ang equipment ng mga bikers? Okay, nakasulat po doon. Dapat na. Pangalawa, dapat alam din ng mga bikers yung tinatawag na traffic signs. Paano magmuestra, how do you signal when you're turning right, when you're turning left, when you're stopping, okay, for safety. And of course, health reminders. Okay, dapat may tubig. Bakit po important? Why I said that of all the things that's included in the JMC, I just highlighted it. Because one of the things that we must really consider is that the importance of education. Hindi lang po basta nasasakay tayo sa bisikleta natin, tapos babiyahe na po tayo. Meron din po tayong responsibilidad to ensure that we follow the rules. No? So for instance, yung safety guideline ng bikers. Kaya ko po nilagay yan. Now, winding down, almost to the end. So therefore, we've talked about operations during the pandemic. How do we move forward towards a better future after this pandemic? Once we find the virus, what should we be doing? Number one is build on gains that we have for public transport operations. Safe and secure, reliable, efficient, integrated and intermodal, affordable and cost-efficient, environmentally sustainable, and people-oriented. Kanina din, isa po sa advocacy ko po is yung accessibility ng ating mga sasakyan. Kaya sana po we can build on it as we move forward towards a better future. Ano pa po? Isa, I think we should also strengthen the digital platform for automatic fare collection. Nabigyan po tayo ng opportunity ngayon to facilitate this. So it is incumbent upon us to make sure that this, well, it's incumbent upon the department to make sure that this is moved forward. We should also sustain development of infrastructure and supportive culture for active transport, meaning let's not lose the momentum for active transport that we have gained because of this pandemic. And support for environment-friendly transportation systems through the use of clean and energy-efficient transport. So, ayun po, dapat pag-iisipan na natin yung transit-oriented development. No? Sana yung ating mga development ay compact na para hindi kailangan ng lagi tayong gumagamit ng ating motorized transport. And of course, all developments of transport should be responsive to disaster risk reduction and climate change mitigation and adaptation. That's why we are always moving towards environment-friendly transport. You know, under all circumstances, you know, we ought to move towards sustainable transportation system. I think this is another change point. Lahat po tayo nasanay na ngayon sa work from home. So sana lang we can sustain this as we think of how we need to reduce or avoid travel altogether. I think all of us have now learned na pwede naman pala kahit nasa bahay lang ako. Lalong-lalo na po, ang dami na pong online shopping. Another is also shift or maintain. This one is very important because now you can see that you have a lot of interest in using active transport. So ito po yung ibig sabihin nito, shift, maintain to more environment-friendly modes. Also, I think this is a good time to also emphasize that with the increasing urban population, the use of private car can no longer be the backbone transport services. It has to shift to public transportation so that it behooves upon all of us to ensure that public transportation becomes an attractive alternative. Now, we all know that meron talagang mga tao ayaw umalis sa kanilang mga sasakyan, so therefore another important thing that we can think of is to improve energy efficiency of transport modes and vehicle technology. Kaya po ang departamento ay is now embarking on the motor vehicle inspection system to improve what in. I know that there's a lot of flack, there's a lot of worries about the MVIF, that it's now really there's effort to actually ensure that this becomes more important. This becomes more transparent and efficient. Lagi pong tinatanong, anong pwedeng gawin? Pero gusto kong pong sabihin, katulad po ng kanta sa High School Musical, that we are all in this together. So dapat po, when we think about how do we move to a better future, we need to think about how each of us can actually contribute to a better future. I know this is not transport, but one of the things we might have to look at is we need to be kinder. We need to be mindful of other people. So it takes all of us to ensure that we have a better future. I'd like to end my presentation by quoting from Charles Dickens, from A Tale of Two Cities. It is the best of times, it is the worst of times. It is the age of wisdom and the age of foolishness. It is a spring of hope, it is the winter of despair. This pandemic has actually resulted to about 70 million to 100 million more people living in impoverished situation. It has actually reversed gains of about a decade of work on poverty alleviation. But we need to remain hopeful. We need to work together to ensure that indeed a better future waits for us. Thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Napalang. It is nice to know, in my personal opinion, it is nice to know that there's somehow a paradigm shift between how we see transportation problems nowadays, that we are more focused on throughput of people rather than throughput of vehicles. Because I personally believe that mass transport and public transport is an important factor in giving solution to the traffic problem in our country. So we are now on the open forum part of our lecture series. The first question, Ma'am, is from Mr. Franklin Amistad.
Sorry, is he here? Is Franklin here? He should show his face. Just joking. I know him. Sige, continue lang.
Okay. Ma'am, what are the practices now in domestic water and rail as freight modes in the Philippines during the pandemic and under the new normal? What about for the motorists in the different regions in our country? Kasi nga po, medyo na-focus tayo sa NCR. Paano daw po yung motorists naman in different regions in the country? Although...
Okay. Ang tanong, medyo malawak ang tanong, di ba po?
Yes, ma'am.
Pero kaya, una po, yung sinasabi kong 50% ay still is also implemented in water and air water and air transport. No? Okay. Particularly in airport terminals. Okay.
That's
so it's still implemented. Yun din pong 50% is actually across all public transport modes under GCQ. Kasi yun naman talaga ang rule ng National Task Force. Okay. Kaya po siguro tinatanong yan kasi merong ibang mga LGUs na hindi po sumusunod. Okay? Ngayon po, yung movement of people, I don't know if I'm actually answering the question properly because it's a very broad question. The other consideration for movement of people now is based on NTF or the National Task Force guidelines, people from, ang tawag ngayon sa movement ng intrazonal ay yung movement of people from areas of the same community classification. Okay, so kung pareho kayong GCQ, pwedeng mag-move in between. Pero hindi pwede yung hindi pareho ang community quarantine classification. Yun po.
Ma'am, personal question po.
Sure. Bawal lang ang love at money, ha?
Yes, ma'am.
Sige,
Um,
continue.
yung isa po kasi sa research namin sa isang subject namin sa Diliman regarding geographic information system
Hmm.
is walkability factor, which is
Hmm.
part of the active transport. The benefit
Yeah.
po kasi daw ng active transport is that it's good for the environment, it's good for your physical health, and it's good for your mental health. Pero
True.
ma'am, ang
Hmm.
na-discover namin, nung nag-research kami around Metro Manila, the best walkable city or the best city for or places for active transport are actually Ayala and BGC, which are rich community. But when it comes to Manila, it has a low level of walkability and for bicycle. So in active transport, somehow the private sector is considered it in the design of their community, while in the public sector it's not yet the case. It's a
Hmm.
good thing that we are hearing from the assistant secretary of the Department of Transportation that we are actually focusing on this right now. So my
Yeah.
question is, what are the particular projects regarding active transport of the Department of Transportation?
Okay. Even before the pandemic, the department has always been mindful of the importance of walking, no,
Yes.
pedestrians. Oh, so meron pong isang proyekto I'd like to just highlight. It's called the EDSA Greenways project, which is designed. Well, the intent of the project is to improve walkability between stations so that people don't, when they move around the station, hindi na sila kailangan motorsiklo, mag-tricycle, no? So the EDSA Greenways is is envisioned to increase walking between stations, improve transfers. Bakit? Kasi po, isa kasi sa this incentive for using public transportation or even lalo na po sa rail lines is yung transfers mismo. Okay? So isa po yung key, yung ating EDSA Greenways. Pangalawa po, if you know about the bus rapid transit programs of the department, kasama po, kasi hindi lang po yan nakafocus doon mismo sa transport, doon sa bus mismo. Kasama po sa improvement dyan is the accessibility to stations. Okay? Another one, if you read the JMC or the Joint Memorandum Circulars that the department inked with the DOH, I think DILG and DPWH, kasama din po doon yung improvement ng pathways.
Yes,
no?
ma'am.
Improvement ng mga daanan ng mga tao. Tama ka, Orland, no? It's been relegated to the background for the longest time. And I don't think it's because mayaman ang BGC or even Macau. It's because they have been mindful of the use. Like for instance, if you look at Makati, mindful sila na meron silang interconnected na walkways. So ang mga tao, pag pumupunta sila Makati, they would be encouraged to walk. That is the intent sana. First phase lang naman because it's just around 5 rail stations din sa EDSA Greenways. Pero start yon. Because hopefully, the local government will also see, pwede rin nating i-improve yung ating at the ground level because of course the Department of Transportation is really on the elevated path, no? Kasi it's between the rail lines, but it will also encourage local government units to improve the pathways at the ground level.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, follow-up question.
Sige.
Kasi ma'am, nagba-bike din po ako. So,
sige.
yung during this quarantine, marami nga pong nadagdag na mga bike lanes. Ang problema lang po namin mga nagbabike is that yung mga bike lanes po, hindi siya masyadong nai-implement kasi marami pa rin nakaharang o kaya nailalagay siya sa pathway na dapat for walking yon instead of biking.
Tama ka, Orland. Kasi nga, this is desperate times, no? Lumabas kasi na ang daming nagbabike, kaya ang ginawa, nag-identify lang ng path.
Yes,
in fact, isang problema na nakita ng departamento na kaya kanina in-emphasize ko po yung education, no? Kaya we are all in this together.
Yes.
Ang isang nakita, for instance, ng MMDA is yung mga nagbumotor. Yung mga nagmumotor, sila ngayon ang kalaban ng mga
bike
ng mga nagbabike. Pangalawa, merong programa naman ang gobyerno. I think we're starting it already. Under the Bayanihan 2, we've also been granted a fund for it. So meron pong network neto. Isang issue siguro na titingnan is paano maintindihan na we all share this road. Kaya importante po para sa akin ang education at ang tinatawag kong social marketing, no? Dapat naintindihan ng lahat that we are on this together. Yun po.
Ma'am, parang follow-up question siya pero hindi galing sa akin. It's from Tom Marie Jandel. How much should the development and maintenance of these facilities be the responsibility of the government versus the private business or private entities?
I think that's geographical. It depends on asan ba yon, okay? Hindi lang hindi yan naman sige gobyerno yan. Hindi po. Kaya lagi kong ine-emphasize yung whole of society approach. Depende yan. Saan ba yan? Okay?
Nasa private property.
If it's in a private property, if it's to link businesses, very rightly so, it should be the government with the it should be the private sector, regulated, of course, by the government if it encroaches on any of government assets. No? So, mahirap yan sabihin na dapat gobyerno. Pero, after having said that, ang ginagawa po ngayon ng DOTR, nakikipag-ugnayan din po sa local government unit para makita yung tinatawag natin yung network. Diba? So kung may network ka, dapat dinidevelop ito under the auspices of the government kung nasa national at local roads po. Yeah.
Ma'am, another question which is really interesting for me. One of the aspects from USTP CDO, RChem, one of the aspects that this pandemic exposed is the problem of saturation of economic activities in one place. For example, the factory of the world, China, where world supply chain have been greatly affected, and here in the Philippines, Manila, which greatly affected the economic throughput of the country. Can this be a catalyst for decentralizing economic investments, such as infrastructure in other parts of the Philippines, rather than focusing on Manila? And I think the real question is, what is the participation or the role of the Department of Transportation in decentralizing our economic centers?
Maganda yung tanong na yan. Kaya lang mukhang hindi masasagot yan ng transportation lamang. Meron po tayong tinatawag na physical framework plan ng National Economic and Development Authority, which is for the Philippines. And one of the anchor policies there is really the development of regional centers so that we would be able to decongest Manila. Bakit? Sige, pag-isipan natin yan, bakit ba ang mga tao pumupunta sa Metro Manila or other urban centers for that matter? It's because this is where jobs are concentrated. You have, even universities are concentrated in your urban centers, right? So it's because of that. So therefore, for us to follow through with the principle of decongesting our urban centers, it's therefore important to improve our regional centers. Anong role ng transport? Ang role ng transport ay to connect the regional centers, the consumer and the producer. Yun ang role ng transport. Hindi siya ang gagawa ng economic policies, pero siya yung magli-link. Gusto ko pong tingnan, offer as an example, the San Juanico Bridge. Why is the San Juanico Bridge, why was it constructed?
Yes.
It was really constructed with the objective of that the economic activities in Tacloban will spill over to somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? So ang role ng transport is really, balikan ko lang. So ang sagot ko po is, number one, even before the pandemic, nakikita na po yan ng gobyerno na dapat nagde-decongest. Kaya ini-improve ang regional centers. Number two, ang transport po, ang kanyang trabaho ay link. It's a physical link. No? So hindi siya sa economic, ngunit siya dapat ang magli-link to ensure movement, no? Like connecting of your production and your consumption. Yun ang isang importante yan.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you po. That's the last question. And Ma'am Josie.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma'am Sheilah Napalang.
Thank you.
Now, we'll proceed with the awarding of certificate. May I call on the Dean of the Institute of Technology, Engineer Ramir M. Cruz.
Hello, good afternoon po. Again, thank you, Dr. Napalang, for that wonderful presentation. So for the awarding of certificate, let me read the citations. Polytechnic University of the Philippines, this certificate of recognition is given to Dr. Maria Sheilah G. Napalang in grateful acknowledgement of her distinguished and invaluable service rendered as guest of honor and speaker in the Science, Engineering, and Technology Professorial Chairholder Lecture Series, or SET PCHLS 2020, with the theme Considerations in Designing Facilities for Active Transport and Using Technology to Enhance Transport Operations. Given this 29th day of October 2020 at the PUP Mabini Campus, Santa Mesa, Manila, Philippines. Signed, Dr. Manuel M. Muhi, University President. Thank you very much, Dr. Napalang.
Thank you very much also for this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much po. Reminders to all our participants, the link for the evaluation to get an e-certificate will be posted later and it's in the chat box. And to formally close our program this morning and this afternoon, we have the Assistant to the Vice President for Student Services, Engineer Florinda H. Oquindo.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. As we conclude this first session of Professorial Chairholder Lecture Series, I would like to thank each and every one of you, for without your presence, this webinar would not have been possible. We know that all of you take time out of your busy personal and professional schedule just to be with us today. We hope that everyone is doing well despite of the present situation. This pandemic has greatly affected all of us, but this has not hindered us to stay connected. That is the power of technology. Pagpamanhin po ninyo kung medyo kanina nagkakaroon tayo ng technical problems, maybe because yun pong connection natin medyo nagkakaroon po ng intermittent connection. But we are hoping that in the future or maybe next year, magkaroon na po tayo ng full implementation of the 5G cellular technology. So medyo siguro po bibilis na ng sobra yung ano natin, yung speed, coverage, and yung connection natin sa ating Wi-Fi. I observed the excellent presentation and active discussions with our two speakers, Dr. Francis Aldrin Uy and ASEC Dr. Sheilah G. Napalang. So I can conclude that the purpose of this Professorial Chairholder Lecture Series has been completely accomplished. I hope that what you have learned through this webinar will help you a lot in your duties and lead to the stability of our country in the future. We hope to see you join us again for another part of this lecture series. Again, thank you and good day to everyone. Thank you po, Ma'am Sheilah, for joining us today. And also po to Dr. Aldrin Uy, maraming pong salamat. Hope to see you again po. Thank you po, and to all the participants, stay safe. Thank you po.
Thank you din po.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So we'd like to acknowledge our guest participants coming from Saudi Arabia, UE, Isabella State University, VSU, UPLB, the Antipolo City LGU, PUPGS, PICE QC, the LGU of Batangas, CAAP, LGU Baguio, the DOTR, Bicol University, NU, the DPWH, the PICE INLAC, Mapua, Batangas State University, FEU Institute of Technology, the MPDO, and TIP Manila. So let's now proceed with the PUP hymn. Okay, thank you very much to all our attendees for today and participants. So for the link for the evaluation form, that is https://bit.ly/3jx5bud. So the lecture of our professorial chairholders will be sent via email, and the certificate will also be
Professorial Kwagayam niya, Professorial Chairholder.
so by the way, next week we'll have the next lecture series entitled the Science, Engineering, Technology Professorial Chairholders Lecture Series. Another set of experts from the different fields will be our guest lecturers. So on November 5, 2020, from 9 a.m. till 11 a.m., we'll have the talk of Dr. Florigo C. Barona, talking about the digital construction project management in a common data environment. While on November 6, 2020 at 10 a.m., we'll have Dr. Christian Endelia, who will be talking about the enhancing engineering education through simulation-based learning. So we'll keep you posted on our next activities. So thank you very much. This has been your Master of Ceremonies, Engineer Joselinda M. Golpeo, and together with Engineer Orland C. Tubola. So good day, everyone.
Hello, Ma'am Sheilah.
Hi, Frank.
By the way, kindly open your
Video.
cameras for the photo opportunity together with Ma'am Sheilah Napalang. Ma'am?
Ano dito? Okay, mapantay yung medic. Okay. Isulat. Sige po.
Ready po, camera on po.
Bye-bye, ma'am.
1, 2, 3. Wait lang po.
One more.
One more
Three-
po.
3 more po.
Three more. Three, ano po.
Ready po, 1, 2, 3. Yes po, ma'am.
Saka po.
Isa na lang, ma'am. Last one po. Ready po. 1, 2, 3. Okay po. Thank you po.
Thank you very much po.
Keep safe, everybody.
See you
Bye-bye.
next.
After the Holy Week, All Saints Day.